Well, long time no see, everybody.
Yes, it has been.
It's been months, and we're going to try to kind of relaunch here tonight and go over a lot of where we have been.
Mhm.
So I want to start with, I want to say about 6 months ago, we started getting emails and messages from people we knew, people we had met on the podcast that knew we had left the charismatic movement, that were just curious, where have we landed?
Mhm.
And we had actually started recording a podcast about where we had landed, and then life kind of went crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so many of you have watched the video that we recorded early in 2024 about leaving the charismatic movement, and we're going to basically go back to the beginning and start over. I want to clarify too, and I actually want to rename that video because it's really not the charismatic movement. There's a lot of theologically sound charismatics out there. Really, what Kenny and I left was the prosperity gospel, the name it and claim it gospel, the don't speak that over your life gospel. That's what we left. And that definitely does not describe all charismatics. So, the last few videos we've recorded, you probably have noticed. Um, well, the last couple have been book interviews, and two of those have been with a woman who left the Church of Christ.
So, as Vicky said, we had some of that uh, charismatic type leaning, and to be fair, that Pentecostal that she was talking about, some of the, or charismatic, I'm sorry, some of those have some pretty solid roots to them. We were, again, referring to a place that was name it and claim it. You had to have enough faith to do this, to do that, to do this. The gifts of the Spirit were active, which, I think I don't want to get into big debate on this, but we think that there's could still be there, but it was a matter of if you don't have these, or if you don't have any of those, then you're probably less than, or your faith isn't strong enough. So we came out of that. There are 17 years roughly. A lot of good people there, so it's not a personal thing. Never has been. But it was a spiritual hamster wheel. This is kind of the term I've been coining here. You were always kept on this proverbial, you must do this, you must do that, you must do that. So it was kind of like, I don't know if I'd say legalism in reverse, but it was legalism in a different way. Is
Yeah,
that?
it's been called two sides, like legalism and prosperity gospel have been referred to as two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it the bottom line is you got to do something.
yeah,
And obviously our faith and should have works with it. We should be doing something, yes. But I mean, it was you had to do this, that, and that in order to earn God's favor.
yeah,
And if you didn't have His favor, you were doing something wrong. That's probably the crux of it all.
yeah.
So we go from that to actual pharisaical type legalism, where it's follow these rules, and you will have your salvation. Don't follow these rules. Step outside of those rules, and you might be at risk of hell. I mean, that's the short answer. It is a broad brush, yes, but it's pretty accurate, I think, at this point. There's nuances to that, but it was really a matter of here's a list of do's and don'ts, and you've got to follow that, and we've got to really be like following that to the T, or else.
Well, and I think an important thing to note here too is for anyone who has walked our shoes, and I know we've met many, many people at this point, dozens who have walked this same path with the prosperity gospel and just left spiritually tired. Um, One of the things that I want you guys watching this to understand is that we spent so much time on this hamster wheel that Kenny described, where you have to pray a certain way for God to hear you. You have to fast. You have to, if you're not speaking in tongues, you don't have the Holy Spirit. I mean, I could just go on and on. It's the hamster wheel. And after so many years, it really, there's, I believe it's in Proverbs. It says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick," and that really kind of boils down to what went on here. When we left, we were just spiritually tired from all of the things that we were supposed to do
Mhm.
that never worked out. And
Mhm.
so when Kenny described the legalism, so we went from the prosperity gospel and we were just very very much wanting to put that type of teaching behind us. And so whenever you come from one extreme, it's normal to go to the other extreme. And so that's what happened to us. We were so anxious to get away from the prosperity gospel that we went hard the other way
Hmm.
and didn't realize that we were falling right into the hands of legalism.
No, no, and that's why it was a slow. I kept calling it a slow burn
Yeah.
because on the surface, it appeared that um, what they stood for was what the Bible stood for, and it seemed as though all the questions that we couldn't get answered, I wouldn't say all, but several of the questions that we couldn't seem to get answered in the prosperity gospel type circles, or the things that were, we'll say, promised in the prosperity gospel circles that don't happen, didn't happen, don't happen, like healings. Not saying God can't heal. No, no. I'm saying where it's you have the faith and then this thing is done. Like I have the faith to raise that person from the dead. I have the faith to whatever. And so that didn't happen. Like we never saw it. We never knew anybody who directly saw it. And the best you could ever hear was stories that it was clear that God healed them, which we believe. Not someone did it because they had the faith and they just essentially called down God to do it. So anyway, the reason I say that though is because uh, these guys, we'll say, seem to have the answer for that. They seem to have, the Bible doesn't speak to that. The Bible is not saying that that's what happens, and or that was for another time, and whatever. Along with, they were not very, they were very willy nilly on certain things. Like you just didn't get an answer on what there wasn't. I wouldn't say rules, but there wasn't what appeared to be a guideline for what you're to do. So we came out of, the prosperity gospel type thing that tends to keep you in that proverbial hamster wheel where you've always got to do this, that, and the other in order to get God's favor, to have his blessing. And when we saw that for what it was, we were there 17 years. When we saw that for what it was, we then decided, that needs to be, we want to put that behind us because that is just, there's a lot to speak of there, but it just wasn't working out. That wasn't what God intended. And we realized that we wanted to put it behind us. That set us up, if you will, to go kind of hard the other direction towards legalism. So we went to a legalistic type church, which we're going to talk about a lot more later. But we went to that church and we were there for about 2.5 years. And close to I would say, not terribly far into it, we started to see some things that we didn't agree with and just weren't lining up. And then by the end of that, we really started to challenge the teachings. And when we started to challenge those teachings, um, it was it started to turn. I'll say when we challenged those teachings, a lot of it was seemed like it was open to have studies, and that's what we love to study. But it was more of a matter of, well, if you don't believe this way, then maybe you don't belong here. And ultimately, that's where it ended. It blew up on us, if you want to say it like that, where we just kept challenging things, and we're like, I can't be a part of this any longer because we don't agree with it. And then it was kind of a, well, then you probably shouldn't be here.
Yeah. And that all happened, like Kenny said, back in August. Um, and we're going to get a lot more into the details and
Sure.
nuances of the story. But uh, so for those of you listening, you might think, well, you just left the church, no big deal. Life goes on. And
I would like to think
you
that.
would think.
Hmm.
Um, so much happened in those 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And to summarize it, we left very traumatized, very damaged. I know I told Kenny I didn't want to step foot in a church ever again.
Yeah.
It's really been a grieving process. We've wanted so much to get back into the podcast studio, but we just didn't have it in us to do it. And it's really only been within the last couple of months that we've had the mental fortitude to get back in
Just ready
here.
to do it. Yeah, get back in the
Um,
saddle, as they say.
and so through that grieving process, and anyone who's heard of the 5 stages of grief, you go through, you know, I don't know them all in order. I should denial, anger, all of the things, and acceptance.
Hmm.
And we both went through an anger phase, and it's still, we still have days where we're angry at ourselves, angry at the people we were around.
Hmm.
And so I say that because we wanted to be very careful when we put this video series out we really thought about the tone that we wanted to have. We didn't want to come across as angry and bitter, although I'm sure at some point some of that will come out. But you know what?
Right.
I also don't want to mask the emotions that we dealt with through this process, because the whole purpose of this series is to warn others of what we went through and try to prevent someone else from going through the pain that we went through.
So we thought about the question of why talk about it? Why share this story with well, essentially all of you? Why go into that? Because we're not necessarily very dramatic people. It doesn't do us any good to get the attention, or to dramatize it and make it sound like it was so bad. Now we've got to talk about it. No, it was. We felt genuinely that others needed to be warned. Not so much that they had to hear our experience, although that's all we have to offer you. It is because we generally feel that this is something that needs to be warned. It is try to reach those that are in it, but more so for those that aren't and have dabbled. Maybe they come in contact with somebody. Maybe they hear the teachings like what we did and think that, well, there might be something good here. Um, don't do it.
I know Kenny and I, the last few months, I'd say the first couple months after we left mainly, we really battled a lot of feelings of how could we be so stupid? How could we not see it? Why didn't we see it sooner? I mean, we really battled with a lot of those.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
You don't think you can be duped,
yeah.
and especially what you come out of, you maybe it's pride. I certainly hope not, but I'm sure that there's some of that there where you think, well, okay, I wouldn't say I've got it figured out, because we don't ever have it figured out, but you're like, I should have known better. And Vicky, I'm sure when she talks about some of this in some of the other videos or deeper stuff, she's actually got some training to look for certain things.
Yeah.
And while that training actually did kick in some ways,
It kicked
it
in late,
it
I felt.
yeah, well, it kicked in late, as you've said, and more importantly, um, some of it was ignored initially because
Yeah.
we thought, hey, we want to give it a shot here. We want to really be following the Bible and following what God says. And so, um, I guess the bottom line is it's easy to get sucked in. So it would be a warning series, if you almost want to say it like that. It's like, we hope that we'll do these series of videos not to bash those in that church, not to bash that system in the wrong way, but to show, hey, this is not what it was claimed to be, which was the one true church. I'll just throw that one out there. And by saying one true church, the claim was we have we have it. We didn't say we all have it all figured out, but we are the church of the Bible, and that here's where the caveat is, and that no one else is. Now, we'll get into a lot more of this, but I don't think the average person would necessarily, in the system, I'll say, will have said that, but that was what was believed. Absolutely, that's what's believed. No one else is faithful in any other system, and we are just following the Bible, and we're the right church.
And so we haven't decided yet how many videos it's going to take to cover all of this,
Yeah.
but basically we're going to tell a little bit about. We're going to go into detail about the 2.5 years we spent. It was the Church of Christ, and we're going to do a whole video on which group we were in, because there's a lot of different sects, sects, of the Church of Christ, and so we want to be careful not to broad brush all of them. But we're going to talk about what happened, what groups we were involved in, and what they teach. We've really thought a lot about how did we get sucked in? What did they do to convince us that we were in the right place? And why did it take us so long to figure it out? And I have to cut us some slack. Like, I've battled with how it took us so long, but at the same time, there's people who have been in this for years and years and years. So I'm thankful that it only took us 2.5 years to figure it out. But we're going to cover all of that, and we're going to go into a lot of depth on how they use Bible studies to lay the foundation for their doctrine, and where you might run into them, some of the tactics they might use. And again, this is intended to be put out as a warning so that hopefully you guys can avoid what we went through.
Yeah. Quick, very fast caveat that I just thought was funny is that a few days ago, a Jehovah Witness letter came in the mail. You know, you've probably all gotten them. And I've gotten them many a times over the years. And I just kind of chuckle because I looked at that and read what they said in there. And then at the end, it's pushing for a Bible study. And again, we'll talk about a lot more of this later, but it was the same tactics. It was the same tactics that they use versus where we were. And to see it now on the outside, you're just like, wow, it's kind of in your face now. But that's a little caveat for later, so tune into the next video.
So again, we don't know how many videos it's going to take. I guess we're going to record as many as it takes.
Yeah.
Our goal is to put this out there and then move on.
Yeah. Yeah,
we've
we
both
move on.
We're both so done. We're both so ready to be done with this grieving process and just put it behind us. So join us for the next video where we're going to start the story and bring you along on this journey to kind of bring you into what happened with us.
It'll be exciting.